Hello and a very warm welcome to you this week on this exciting episode of U.Gov. U.Gov is all about you and the government. What are your responsibilities or obligations as a citizen? And we also look at the corresponding functions or duties that the government should actually carry out. I am Itohan Olomu-Agbodo. We'll go on a quick break and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Now on StarTimes Channel 465 is your #1 Christian and lifestyle channel, Love World Plus, meeting all your entertainment needs. Trending, dedications, joyride, celebrity lounge, video tales, and so much more. For those of you who love current affairs, we've got you covered. News focus, strictly politics, the agenda, U.Gov, and so on. Be sure to always be in the know with our informative programs, as we also get you settled with amazing documentaries like A Day in Your Neighborhood, Discover Africa. These will blow your mind. The youths and kids are not left out, as we have created a platform for them to speak, learn, and have fun. And to crown it all, we serve fresh, hot, and sizzling foods to feed your spirit, soul, and body. That is Pastor's programs. There's never a dull moment with us. So make it a date on Channel 465 as we take you on a smooth journey to cater to all your needs. Love World Plus, Channel 465 on StarTimes.
This week on Edibox, we will be reviewing the history of Nigeria. Nigeria became a British protectorate in 1901. Colonization lasted until 1960, when an independence movement succeeded in gaining Nigeria its independence. Nigeria first became a republic in 1963, but succumbed to military rule 3 years later after a bloody coup d'etat. A separatist movement later formed the Republic of Biafra in 1967, leading to the 3-year Nigerian Civil War. Nigeria became a republic once again after a new constitution was written in 1979. However, the republic was short-lived when the military seized power again 4 years later. A new republic was planned to be established in 1993, but was dissolved by General Sani Abacha. Abacha died in 1998 and a fourth republic was later established in 1999, which ended 3 decades of intermittent military rule. Stay tuned for more on the history of Nigeria.
You're welcome back. This is U.Gov, and this week we'll be taking a look at Nigeria's political history. We'll be going down memory lane, seeing how this nation has developed from the start till date. And we'll first of all go to the streets and get to hear what Nigerians are saying about the history. How well do they know the history of this beloved country? Stay with us.
Nigeria have different history, and we have the history of the governmental era, we have the history of traditional rules, and we have the history of ECOWAS, different type of history.
Nigeria history?
Yes.
Buhari is a...
I know nothing, no, but I know nothing, but my parents used to tell me what has happened in the old days, and now it's different.
Nigeria has a very landmass and is well recognized in the whole world. It's a country that needs to set a pace in Africa. It's blessed with mineral resources, but if all Nigerians know all this, Nigeria is a better place to live.
I know that in 1960 Nigeria got independence. What again? 1963 we got republic. What again? What did I know again? I wasn't there then. You understand? I just said story. But what I learned was that okay, Nigeria was good then.
The size, approximately 1 million square per meter. Okay, Nigeria has 36 states. And what else? The member president, Muhammad Buhari.
Okay, Nigeria got her independence 1st October 1960. And by 1914, the North and South was amalgamated by Lord Frederick Lugard. And the first Nigeria president was Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. And Tafawa Balewa was the prime minister then.
Quite interesting. A lot of people saying they don't know about Nigeria's history. Some saying they know little, and others are actually running away from saying what they know. Everyone should know a bit about the history of their nation. Nigeria is a very special country, and you should know about where we are coming from as a nation. We have a lecturer in the Department of Political Science in the University of Lagos, and he is the current chairman of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU. Dele Ashiru is standing by to tell us about the history of Nigeria. Stay tuned.
Talking about Nigeria's political history from pre-colonial times, the first point I'd like to make is that, but for colonialism, maybe we will never have had a country called Nigeria.
Okay.
Because before the advent of the colonialists, the geographical area now referred to as Nigeria was populated by people of different ethnic, religious, different sociocultural background. In the far north, we had the Hausa people of the north, and the 1806 jihad of Uthman Dan Fodio brought about what is today referred to as the Hausa Fulani. Now, to the west of Nigeria, we had the very famous Oyo Empire. And in Oyo, there was what was regarded as a kingdom at that time, wherein the Alafin held sway. Indeed, the Alafin was said to have a larger-than-life personality. In fact, it was referred to as Alashe Ekeji Orisha, which means that his command is second only to that of the Almighty God. In the north, they had the emirate system, and that is usually led by the emir. Now, to the eastern part of the country, we had the Igbo people, whose political system was sedimentary. And then there existed a lot of other ethnic groups, like the Ibibio, like the Efik, the Kalabari, etc. Also in the north, we have a pocket of ethnic minorities, the Kanuris, the Gwaris, the Jokuns, the Thieves, and all that. So, the political configuration of Nigeria at that time was, in a tripod manner. To the north, we have the emirate system led by the Sultan of Sokoto at that time, because it was Uthman Dan Fodio who led the jihad of 1806, where we now came about what is referred to as the House of Fulani. In the West, like I said, the Yorubas were led by the Alafi. But in the Igbo societies, they had what was called a sedimentary or an acephalous system, in which they don't have a monarchical system, properly so called. So, and that had this pre-colonial history had implication for the colonial arrangement and then the post-colonial politics that we now have. That is talking about the pre-colonial history. Now, the colonialists came into Nigeria, in the 17th century, first by the explorers, and then later by missionaries, and then the imperialists and the colonialists. Now, the colonial history of Nigeria can be said to have begun from Lagos, even though some versions, alluded to the Lokoja, axis of where the Landa brothers and the earliest form of Europeans came. But politically speaking, Lagos became a crown colony of the British Empire. And by that token, the amalgamation of the Northern Protectorate, which came under British influence, by the activities of the Landa brothers and the activities of the Royal Niger Company, held that territory in trust for Britain. And then there was what was also known as the Southern Protectorate with the colony of Lagos. It was in 1914 that Sir Frederick Lord Lugard amalgamated, the Northern Protectorate with the Southern Protectorate and the colony of Lagos to now form what is today known and referred to as Nigeria. Indeed, the name Nigeria was said to have been given to this country by Mrs. Flora Shaw, who incidentally was a journalist in Nigeria at that time, and the wife of Lord Frederick Lugard. So, the history of Nigeria, colonially speaking, began from 1914 after this amalgamation. The history of Nigeria can best be understood if we do what I call an anatomy of that society beginning from 1914. You will recall that in 1920, there was a pressure group along British West Africa. That pressure group was known as the National Congress for British West Africa. This Congress was led by Kingsley Hayford, and they went to England with a charter of demand. Chief amongst this charter of demand was the demand for elective principle. Because in 1914, Nigeria was ruled by what they call the Nigerian Council, headed by, Lord Frederick Lugard at that time, who was the governor, of the newly created Nigeria. But the agitation of the National Congress of British West Africa led to the introduction of what was called the elective principle, in 1922. So the first constitution in Nigeria, with which Nigeria was managed and governed, was the Sir Hugh Clifford's Constitution of 1922.
Okay.
I needed to state this particular fact because the consequence of this elective principle reverberated all through, the history of Nigeria until 1967, when the Civil War broke out. Now, what were those significant, issues occasioned by the 1922 Sir Hugh Clifford's Constitution. Recall that I talked about the elective principle. At that time, elective principle was only granted to Lagos and Calabar. The elective principle was that right that was granted to the natives to elect their representatives into the Legislative Council. The Legislative Council was responsible for governance of Nigeria at that time. But unfortunately, that legislative principle was limited to the southern part of the country. So whereas beginning from 1922, when the Southerners had engaged in political and electoral activities, the whole of the North was quiet because the elective principle was not extended to the northern part of the country. The implication of that was, and is still, that the southern part of the country developed earlier politically via the formation of political parties, via the development of independent press in terms of journalism, etc. Developed in terms of political engineering, the spirit of give and take, consensus building, occasioned by the diverse political parties that we had at that time. At this period, there was no such activities in the North. Not only that, because of the closer affinity of the colonial masters to the southern part of the country and the less resistance which they got from the north, it was easier for the colonialists to shield the northern part of the country from Western education. So whereas the southern part also developed educationally, the whole of the north had a slow start
in terms of education.
And I give an example to portray this. Whereas the southern part of the country have been producing graduates from the 18th, 17th and the 18th centuries. The first graduate in northern part of the country was around 1950. So you can see the huge gap in terms of political development and, social engineering, built upon these political occurrences. So, whereas there were political activities in the south, the governor was still legislating for the northern part of the country. However, this changed at about 1946 via the Arthur Richards Constitution. Unfortunately also, it was the Arthur Richards Constitution that created the now entrenched three bifurcation of Nigeria. What I mean by that is north, east, and west. Because at that time, the Constitution only provided for, legislative houses in these three regions. And there began, this entrenched regionalism in the political development of Nigeria. Now, after the Richards Constitution, we then had the 1951 Macpherson Constitution. The Macpherson Constitution is also important in understanding Nigeria's history for one reason. There was a constitutional conference in 1950 preparatory to the Macpherson Constitution. Let me also say that the Macpherson Constitution was the most debated constitution in the history of the country, and it was the most short-lived. Why? Because at the 1950 Ibadan Conference, Chief Obafemi Awolowo demanded that the regional configuration should be based on ethnic contiguity. By so doing, he demanded that the Yoruba-speaking areas of Kaba, Igbomina, Offa, etc., that were hitherto part of the northern region should be allowed to join the Yoruba-speaking areas of the west. Of course, the northern region rejected that demand, and the British colonial masters supported them in the rejection of that demand. And they specifically told that conference that should Chief Obafemi Awolowo continue to make such demands, the colonial government was going to treat it as treasonable felony. So, that conference agreed that those areas should remain in the north. But that was not only the significant aspect of the 1951 Constitution. Recall that in 1953, Chief Anthony Enahoro moved the self-government motion for 1956. What that meant was that Nigeria should become independent in 1956. At the Legislative Council in Lagos, the northern delegates cautioned him that rather than and substituted the phrase 1956 to independence as soon as possible. So you can see how, the political history of the country had been playing out in terms of this division between the north and the south, occasioned by the slow political development in a particular region of the country, which is the north.
Well, you've been listening to Daily Ashiru talking about Nigeria's history, tracing it back from the pre-colonial times. We'll take a quick break and we'll return to that interview. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Daily Ashiru is still standing by to talk about Nigeria's history, and we'll be asking him, why did Nigeria not actually achieve independence earlier than 1960? What happened? What could have been different? Let's take a listen.
Immediately after those occurrences, there was the 1954 Littleton's Constitution, which introduced regional federalism into the country. Nigeria became a full federalist state, and then by 1957 there was another constitutional conference in London, famously referred to as the London Constitutional Conference of 1957, and then a follow-up conference in Lagos in 1958. One important message in the 1958 conference was that in preparatory to Nigeria's independence, the minorities in Nigeria feared that they may be marginalized in an independent Nigeria, and consequent upon that feeling of marginalization, a commission was set up to look into the affairs of the minority and advise the colonial government as to what to do. The Henry Willings Commission sat and found out that the fears of minorities in an independent Nigeria was genuine. But rather than create states as recommended by the Henry Willings Commission to take care of the fears of the minority, the colonial government tied creation of state to the issue of independence. What I mean by that is that they gave a condition that should Nigerian political elites opt for creation of state, they cannot get independence in 1960. And because the political elites in Nigeria at that time were in a hurry to take over from the colonial masters, they consented to allow the colonial masters to include in Nigerian constitution, independence constitution, a long list of rights to cater for the minority and then get independence in 1960. And consequent upon this, Nigeria was granted political independence in 1960.
Quite interesting, Dele Ashiru giving us a brief history of Nigeria. As I said earlier, everyone should know a bit of the history of their nation because history is actually the past interacting with the present. How do you know how to go forward if you don't know where you are coming from? We have some more tidbits for you. Well, quite an interesting episode we had, and Dele Ashiru was talking about the history of Nigeria. I hope you were able to pick one or two insights from the discussion this week. And we know we're going to visit this issue of Nigeria's political history again because it's a topic that is quite deep, a topic that we cannot finish in just a day. We would like to hear from you as well. You can log on to our website on www.loveofplus.org, and you can send comments to the numbers that will be showing on your screen now. I am Itohan Olomu-Agbodo. Bye for now.